Well, hello guys, and welcome to the Chem Crown channel, where I share interesting and exciting information about the most basic concepts of chemistry. If this video helps you to learn a little bit about this subject, then please like the video, share the video with your friends on different platforms, and don't forget to give me a thumbs up while watching this video at some point. Now with all this said, let's dive into the class lecture. So today we are going to discuss what is yield, what does it mean, and what does it stands for. Well, you can define this term in so many different ways, but here I have defined this term in two different ways. The first way you can define this yield is the amount of product forms in a chemical reaction is called yield. The second way you can define the term yield is it is actually the quantity of product in moles whenever a chemical reaction happens. So let's explain this idea with the help of a very simple general example. So here you can see this general reaction in which 1 mole of A reacts with 1 mole of B, and it gives us 1 mole of the product C. Now this C is called the yield of this reaction, but remember that this is only a hypothetical or verbal representation of the whole situation we are considering now. But what about the real situation in which you have to perform the same reaction in the laboratory? Well, if you perform this reaction in the laboratory, you will always get smaller amount of the product which will be smaller than 1 mole. Now the question is why it happens. It's because when we were trying to define this term yield, we just ignored so many experimental factors. So on the basis of this discussion, we can say that there are two types of yield. One is called the theoretical yield and the other one is called the experimental yield. So now let's discuss these two different kind of yields one by one. Now I want to discuss theoretical yield, and it can be defined as the maximum amount of the product that can be obtained as a result of a chemical reaction. Here I have two examples. In the first one, 1 mole of A reacts with 1 mole of B, and it gives us 1 mole of the product C, which is the maximum amount is the theoretical yield of. In the second example, you can see that 2 moles of sodium chloride reacts with 2 moles of water, and it gives us 2 mole of sodium hydroxide, 1 mole of H2, and 1 mole of chlorine gas. If you want to find out the molecular weight of sodium hydroxide, it would be 80 grams, or 8, which is the theoretical yield of this reaction. In the same way, 1 mole of H2 and 1 mole of chlorine gas is also the theoretical yield of this reaction. Another important point I want to let you know that we are not able to find the exact value of theoretical yield for any specific reaction, and the reason for this is there are so many experimental factors which are involved, and it don't allows us to find the exact value for theoretical yield during the experimental process in the laboratory, and we will discuss all these experimental factors at the end of this video. Now let's explain what is actual or experimental yield. So we can define this term as the amount of product which we can obtain in a chemical reaction. Now explain this idea with the help of a very simple example we discussed just before a while, in which 2 moles of the sodium chloride reacts with 2 moles of water, and it gives us 2 moles of sodium hydroxide, 1 mole of hydrogen gas, and 1 mole of Cl2 gas. But this is again just a theoretical or verbal representation of this reaction, and these are called the theoretical yields of this reaction. But what about the situation in which we perform this reaction in the laboratory? Well, if we perform this reaction In the laboratory, then we might get 77 gram for 2 moles of sodium hydroxide, 1.8 gram for 1 mole of hydrogen, and 69 grams for 1 mole of Cl2 gas, which are less than 80 grams, 2 grams, and 71 grams respectively. So these kind of yields are called experimental or actual yields, which are less than the theoretical yields. In this case, the theoretical yield is 80 gram, while the experimental yield for sodium hydroxide in this case is 77 gram. In the same way, the theoretical yield for hydrogen is 2 gram here, but the experimental yield for hydrogen is 1.8 gram. In the same way, the theoretical yield for chlorine is 71 gram in this case, which is the theoretical yield, while it is 69 gram for Cl2 in the experiment. Thank you for watching and see you in the next class.